Well, hi folks, this is Darren with My RV Works. A lot of you will ask questions to the YouTube videos that we've put out, and so as I get time, I jump in and try to answer some that I can. A lot of times I try to come up with some really nice analogies or a demonstration for something to help answer your question. And so we'll be doing that on this one. So if you like this kind of content, subscribe to our channel because I'll be coming out with more and more of these things. I've been collecting pieces, parts to do demos on. This one's coming from Shari. Now, Shari's in Louisiana, and I spent my first 18 years of my life in Louisiana. So, hey, how y'all doing down there? Moved up here because to get away from the humidity. But Shari's got a 3-year-old RV, and when she runs that slide room out, it's tripping her 15 amp fuse. And so I don't know if it's right away or if it's after it's moved a little bit. That would matter. If it's as soon as you hit the switch, the fuse blows, then you have a dead short, and you got to look for that. If the room starts to go out a little bit and then the fuse blows, well, then it's a current issue, and you have to look at the motor, lubrication, things, why is that motor working so hard? So her son put a 30 amp fuse in there, and that fuse still blew. Again, if it's blowing right away, Shari, it's going to be a dead short, and so you're looking for a dead short. So if you have a meter, here, I'm going to reach for my meter here. If you have a meter, then what you would do is you would put your meter into continuity mode. That's going to be that mode right there that I'm pointing to right there. It's going to have that omega to it. Okay, and then you'll take your two leads. Usually you'll touch your two leads together and your meter might beep or your meter might display as 0. So I went ahead and got my leads on here. So with my meter set in that ohms mode right there, okay, then you'll take your two leads. Let me get myself ready here. And you'll touch them together and it's beeping and it's showing 0. Okay, so it's not enough just to hear the beep. You also need to look at the numbers. Okay, so what would be interesting to do is if your fuse is blowing right away, it's a dead short. Okay, so then you would use a meter in a mode like that, and you would connect it to where that fuse is. You would take your black lead to ground and your red lead to the fuse right there. And when you hit your switch, if it's beeping right away, then that is a dead short to ground. Okay, so I want you to look for that. Okay, is it a dead short to ground? But there's another 2 things that I could pull out of your, I'm just setting those things down. There's 2 more points that I could pull out of your question to help. So the first thing is, if you're flipping your switch and it's tripping your fuse right away, that's typically an indication of an absolute dead short. That means it's one of those wires is touching a ground frame on your RV. You had a couple more comments on your question here. So every time your slide room is going in and out, it's tripping a fuse, and you're having to replace it. Your son put a 30 amp, and that one's tripping as well. So then you go on to say that you put the 15 back in, and the slide room still won't work. But you also go on to mention that you don't have a battery in your RV, and that somebody on YouTube said that a battery in an RV is required, and that you should put a battery in it. And so let me talk about the battery for just a second, and then when we're done here, I don't expect my battery talk to go too long. It could, but I'm going to try my best to keep it compact, my story here. And then what I'll do is I've got a fluke meter here that will do data logging, and I can display that on a computer screen. So then I'm going to set I'll put the computer somewhere where you guys can see it while I bring the slide room in and out, and you'll be able to see that current profile on this graph as the slide room's coming in. And the reason I want to show you that is so that you can see those current profiles as that motor is going in and out, and that might be another indication as to why your fuse is blowing. So just real quick on your battery, we get called in on a lot of service calls on these RVs that are set up full time, and which is great for a business like ours, and it's great for customers like that because they can't bring their RV to a shop. They built a deck around it, put a roof on it, put trees around it, and everything. Typically, those folks, their batteries are neglected. They don't keep them maintained because they're always plugged into shore power, and there's indications that the DC is dying even though you're plugged into shore power. And so when we get called in and we start doing the diagnosis on that, typically what we find is a converter has failed. And if the converter has failed, I like to also look at the battery as I'm in my discovery phase of the diagnosis, and we find that the battery is either physically not there, or if you take the caps off, it's totally dried up, and the only thing that's visited that battery in the last 3 years is spiders. Okay, and so what that is doing is the converter's job is to charge the battery. Okay, it's called a converter charger. If the battery's not there, then the converter's got to do everything. Now, if you're just running lights or some simple appliances like that, that would not be a problem. The converter can handle that. But larger appliances like your furnace consumes about 10 amps. Certainly your slide room, I think you would mention they put a 15 amp fuse in there. So that converter is having to do a lot of heavy lifting to bring those slide rooms in and out, to run your furnace, things like that. Lights, not a big deal. And especially if you were to replace all this with LED lights, the converter by itself can handle that. So a converter is in the neighborhood of, let's just call it $200. It depends on if you're going to buy a 25, 35, 55, what amp rating your converter is. But those things are in the neighborhood of 200 bucks. Some are more, some are less, but let's just say that's the bell curve of pricing of converters is right in the $200 price range. Battery, if you're living full time in your RV, you can get a Group 24 battery, which is like one of these RV marine batteries. You can get a Group 24. It just, your full-time RV needs a battery. Like if your house was on a well, you would have the pump down on the ground and then that expansion tank, so that when you turn that water faucet on just to rinse your hands or fill up a cup, the water is coming from the tank, not all the way from the pump. If you didn't have that tank and you turn that water fixture on, then it would be coming directly from the pump and you'd burn your pump up just to turn your water on for a couple seconds. So we understand that in a house. So that's kind of the same analogy in your RV. Get a battery. If you're full-timing and always plugged into shore power, it could be a Group 24. Check it every quarter, every 3 months, just pop the caps off and it's distilled water. Just keep that in there. Don't ever let your plates ever see air or you've just destroyed your battery. So keep those, filled in. I'll do other videos on batteries because I do have a lot to offer on batteries. I've been around them a lot and there's a lot of tips and tricks and things I can offer to help you guys with batteries. Got some really great analogies. But let's at least put a battery in there, okay, Shari? Even if it's a Group 24, and let that converter be the pump that's filling the tank, the battery, and let that battery run all your lights and run all your furnace and run your slide room in and out and all that kind of stuff, okay? Now, what I want to do now is I'm going to move the camera around a little bit, and I'm going to set my meters up so you're going to be able to watch this trend on my computer screen as the slide room's coming in and out. And I want you to pay attention to these peaks and things going on with that. So I'll finish up with that, and then we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so let's do that. Let me get set up for that. Let's see, here we go. Okay, so what I've done now is I've got a fluke meter. What is this thing? It is a 375FC. It's one of these fluke meters that will give you Bluetooth output, and then you get the Fluke Connect software. And so I'm displaying the current that the meter is reading, and this is going to be a graph. Okay, so what I'm going to do is run the slide room in. You're basically sitting on the table, and your perched camera is there sitting in the booth. So I'm going to bring the slide room in. Watch that profile. Okay, I can't see it. So we're bringing the slide room in. It's always good when you bring your slide room in to bring it in and hold it for, a second when it's done. Okay, and what was our peak there? It looks like it's coming in right at about 22 amps. You may have seen what the numbers were here, but that graph shows us about 22 amps right there. So now I'm going to bring it back out, and let's watch the out profile of that motor. Okay, so that lower profile there was about maybe 18 amps. You would have seen it here, you could tell me, but I'm just looking at the graph. And so looking at this graph, you see how the motor peaked here at the top and peaked down at the bottom. And your fuse might be blowing because you're drawing more current than it's rated for. And if that's a situation, that's where you start looking for lubrication issues, failed parts. Sometimes the wiper seals on the side of these slide rooms, you could take baby powder and wipe those down, keep them flippy flappy back and forth, nice and slick. But I did want to show you that, so you certainly don't need to buy a $500 meter to see this kind of stuff. But I just wanted to show you this. It's about to march its way right off the chart there. So let me close this. If this was helpful, give us a thumb up. It sure does help. And subscribe to our channel if you like this kind of content. I'm always coming out with new tips and tricks. And if you give us a question, give a shout out to where you're located. It's always fun to hear where people are located at. So from Joyce, Washington, this is Darren signing off until the next video. See you later, guys.